So agricultural, this is where we see the Homo sapiens change from foragers to farmers. So this idea that, before the foragers, they would live day by day, they would spend, X amount of hours going through finding food, come home with their community, cook, spend time together, and then they were not permanently settled. Then they would travel and go to another area, find food, and just keep living this like
Bush lifestyle.
free lifestyle. They didn't have to worry about where the, planting and food and all that because it was just part of nature. It grew
Mhm.
and they just go find somewhere else to eat. And then while they're somewhere else, then where they just left it grew back up. And
Mhm.
so it was a constant replenishment that they didn't have to worry about. Once they got the idea that, hey, we can turn things like grains and wheats into and potatoes and start cultivating that and have more food without having to go out and search, that gave them this concept of like a permanent settlement and
Mhm.
all of that started coming about. They started thinking about the future,
Mhm.
thinking, worrying, pondering, and planning. And then that's where, we start. It leads up to our everyday culture now, which
Mhm.
I thought was interesting, like why we worry, why we plan,
Mhm.
when at one time we didn't have to. So
Mhm.
it was interesting to see that we brought all of this upon ourselves.
Yeah, and he also talked about how this revolution, the agricultural revolution, was the biggest fraud,
Hmm.
because we went from this self-sustaining, much more, I guess, present species. Like
Yes.
we were much more with nature. We knew all the signs and stuff. And I think with the farming side of it, we definitely became a much, in his terms, weaker species because we became a lot more just settled into our specific area. We
Hmm.
just had to protect our crops. We were eating the same stuff versus being so different, eating different things. Because he said, like, other earlier humans, they would gather different berries. They would eat so many different things every single day. Versus the humans in during this revolution, they ate just wheat
Yeah.
and other things, and it kind of made them really dependent on
Yeah.
this. And so that's why he said it's a big fraud because it did sort of get rid of the thing that made the humans really special, which was
Yeah.
that we were so adaptable to the
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah. If you guys watch our summary, we go through kind of all of the different things that happened with the agricultural revolution. For instance, staying in one local area, they started breeding infectious diseases,
Mhm.
uh, depending on being dependent on potatoes and starches
Mhm.
and things like that. Children that were born relied more on grains and oatmeal versus drinking breast milk.
Mhm.
So you saw more children mortality, you saw more smaller children. The act of having to cultivate and labor was
Mhm.
unusual to foragers because they never sustained back pains and backaches and things
Right.
like that. And so it started evolving the human body
Mhm.
because they were doing things that they biologically weren't ready to do yet because the
Right.
ecosystem wasn't ready.
So, did you like this part of the
Not really.
No? Okay, which part?
I mean, the understanding it was great, but then he also goes into a lot of I think initially, I don't know why I felt offended because
Okay.
he essentially were saying we suck as human beings now because back then it was way better.
Mhm.
And this is where I kind of got the idea that he's more like, well, it's almost like he's saying progress isn't good.
Mhm.
But eventually we have to progress, right? We have
Mhm.
to progress. It's we can't stay in the same position forever because he also does say consistency creates for a dull mind. Like it's natural for us to continually evolve.
Mhm.
So I guess I don't really understand his argument. Is he just saying that we evolved too fast or we shouldn't evolve at all? Because his tone is progress is killing us.
I think his argument was that we evolved too fast, because we didn't give ourselves the time to make that proper transition
But he
from hunter gatherer to farmer.
Yeah, but he just says all of these bad things about
Right.
being a farmer and then all of these great things about being a forager, and
Right.
it was just so, like, one-sided. It seemed like it's
Mhm.
like, "It's better if we did this," but then, we now have gotten to the point where we can no longer go back from agriculture, like, you
Right.
can't go backwards, which I understand, but it was just so, like, this was the perfect life almost. We had no disease, we had long mortality, long life rates, lifespans, and it was very one-sided for me here because I was in my mind, progress is important. We needed to progress, and some of the things that we did progress at during that time, it felt to me appropriate.
It's like I like this revolution a lot, and the reason is because he
You like the
does.
fraud.
I like the fraud, because he does say that it kind of may create the first stepping stone into humans becoming so dependent on
Mhm,
their environment versus humans being so independent. So,
mhm.
like, I think what his main argument was like before humans were very much in control of their lives. They knew exactly what they needed to do. They worked together, and they lived day to day. They were more present. Versus now we're talking about the future. So like, hey,
Always,
we
yeah.
need to get all these things ready for the future. We need to have this much wheat for the next few. I think because of that, a lot of the anxiety, a lot of the stress that maybe humans previously did not have was introduced to us.
Right.
So that's why I liked it a lot because that is
It
very
explains,
relative to
yeah.
now as well, where like a lot of us are depressed because we're looking into the future so much. We're trying to get as money as we can, as much money as we can now, and and in order to make sure our future is safe,
Yeah.
or what he calls what was
The
it?
luxury trap. Is
The
that where you're
luxury
going
trap.
at?
Yes,
Yes.
exactly that too. Where like we're buying new things nonstop and we're continuously doing it just to kind of
Yeah.
stay
The luxury trap, I think he says, is the idea being obsessed with something that is supposed to make your life easier
right.
ends up making your life even harder.
Exactly.
One example is email, right?
Hmm.
So he says back in the day, when you wrote a letter, it took forever, right? Because you'd have to send it and it had to be delivered. It would take days or weeks or whatever to get a mail. And so you only wrote what was absolutely necessary.
Hmm.
And then once you sent that letter, you knew how long it would take to come back. So
Hmm.
it would be an extended amount of time.
Yep.
Now we've got email that's
Hmm.
supposed to decrease the time it takes to send a stamp, submit something. It's just instantaneous. It gets to someone, and that's supposed to save us time.
Hmm.
However, with the creation of that, now we just over communicate about
Right.
everything that's so not important, things that shouldn't even be in an email. How many
Hmm.
times have we seen that, right?
Yes.
Like this should not have. Why are you sending this to me? And then with that comes that obligation of a response. You have to respond right away. You have to drop everything that you're doing. There's this
Hmm.
like sense of urgency that's been created when the initial idea was to reduce the amount of time and wait time and all of that, and now we've added something else on.